everyone, I'm Selena Hill, and this is the new norm on Black Enterprise, sponsored by Cadillac, where I speak with business leaders, elected officials, entertainers, and public figures about their current projects and the impact they're making in today's world. Today, I have the privilege to speak with Emmy award winning journalist, NBC News Live prime anchor, and New York Times bestselling author Linsey Davis about her new children's book, Girls of the World, doing more than ever before. Linsey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, what a privilege. Thank you, Selena.
Absolutely. So I have your book here. It is gorgeous. The words are so powerful, but then also so relatable for young girls. I know this is your sixth book, and it really talks about the unlimited potential that girls have. And you use words like brave and strong and courageous to describe them, which are normally words that we hear being described for young boys. So I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
You know what's funny is that I have a son who's going to be 10 in March. And when I hear him talk about things like, "Ooh, that's for girls," or, "Oh, no, like, I'm not going to cook, that my wife will do the cooking." Even at his young age, I think based on society, because we're not trying to endorse that kind of thought inside the home, he's coming away at his young stage with these ideas of the norms and these boxes for what's for girls and what's for boys. And as you said, words like brave and strong are not often associated with girls. And I think that that's problematic. And I think that it's really important early on to spread those seeds, plant those seeds for girls to be empowered, for girls to be affirmed, for girls to be self assured. Even when you look at the statistics with social media and girls who are feeling suicidal or feeling like they're less than or feeling like, they're not valued, it's quite often girls. You don't really hear about teenage boys in those kinds with that kind of mindset and kind of carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. And so I just feel that if we start really early, that we can kind of dismiss some of the incoming from society about what we should be and what our dreams should be as far as profession wise or just our aspirations in life. I don't think that they should be shrunk down.
Yes, no, I totally agree, Lindsay. And I can't wait to read this book to my goddaughter and
Mm.
just, nieces. And just, I really, again, it's so inspirational. And one thing I noticed is that you released it during the beginning of Women's History Month and on Super Tuesday. Now, was that intentional?
You know, we wanted to do it during March for Women's History Month, and it just felt like a moment to really be empowering and think about in the political realm of 1789 is when the inauguration happened for George Washington, and then in those 235 years in this country we still have not had a woman leading us. And while the United States of America is often touted as being, the most advanced country in the society, we're still way behind many other countries who've had female prime ministers and female presidents. And so I do feel like there is this political awareness, this timing that did feel relevant. In that even when you have candidates, quite often running for president, you don't have an equal number of women who are even running, women who are even throwing their name into the ring. And I think that that's problematic. I have to believe that women feel we can do the job. So why are we not even applying? And even when you think about it in terms of the Fortune 500, that you have only 10% of female CEOs who are at the helm of these companies, why is that? And so I dare say that this book is also for boys who are forming their opinions early on, to realize that their sisters and nieces and cousins and mothers and aunties are equals. That they need to feel like we bring them into the tent as well to say, yes, we are good enough and we are smart enough and we need to be included.
Absolutely, Lindsay. And as you talk about, young girls having ambition and dreams, you're a perfect example. I mean, you've conducted exclusive interviews with the likes of Vice President Kamala Harris. You've moderated presidential primary debates, hosted the red carpet at the Oscars, and those are just a few of some of your highlights. So I wanted to ask you, like, did you always have ambitious career aspirations, and where does your personal motivation come from?
You know, early on, I would say my parents set this foundation of not just faith, but faith in God, but also belief in myself. And I always joke that I was either smart enough or silly enough to believe them when they said, you can do whatever you want to do, you can be whatever you want to be. I really did put stock in that. And so as a result, I never felt limited. I never felt diminished. I always really felt empowered by my parents. And in that, I've always thought about that in terms of the types of messages I want to put out into the world. Um, the kinds of thoughts that my parents put into me early on, I want to put into my own son and his classmates and children who are of the same age. I just think that it's so important, and for young girls in particular to hear that messaging. If they're not hearing it in their home, that maybe this will be the first place that they hear it, or if they are hearing it in their home, that this will just further validate that truth that's already being spoken to them.
And I'm so glad that you said all that, because when it comes to the home, like you said, you're raising a son in your home to think of women as equal. And already he's being socialized to think,
Hmm.
differently about, gender roles when it comes to men and women, well, boys and girls. Why is this so important for not just young girls and boys, but for parents to sort of read this book to their children, because they may not be aware of the words, the language, or the tone that they use towards their daughters versus their sons. And that could be, I'm thinking, contribute to why young girls may not always think the best of themselves.
I think that you're so right, and I think that as people will often say, a lot more is caught than taught, right? And so we can have specific, lessons or agendas. We can tell our kids, do as I say, but it's quite often as you do that they're going to follow. And many of those messages are subliminal messages, but they're picking up something about, you know it just so happens, like in our house, my husband doesn't really cook that much. He kind of makes a mean bowl of oatmeal, and that's kind of where it ends. And so my son, just watching that, his immediate thought is, oh, men don't cook. I don't have to cook. That's a woman's job. And again, that's nothing that we ever said to him. That's nothing we ever expressed or verbalized, but that's just what he's observing. And so I think that we have to actually go out of our way and counter that kind of belief system or conversation. And I hope that this book does that.
So, Lindsay, as I was saying about your career, you've advanced to the highest pinnacle in broadcast news television. And I heard you mention the confidence that your parents instilled in you, but also your faith. What do you credit most for the success you found in your career? Was it those two elements, or was it something else?
I think it really is between those two. I think that, I always grew up with a strong belief in God. And, inherently, I think if you believe and trust in that, that can be empowering in and of itself. And then not only that, but, I had a family who supported and believed in me and really then gave me the exposure and experiences to only further enrich my life and what I felt that I could do. And so they were always kind of just pouring into me. And so in many ways, the first children's book I ever wrote, The World is Awake. It really was my kind of love letter to God, just a way to express my gratitude and show just how grateful I am for God's majesty and His creation all around us, including us. And really just wanting my son, who had kind of started. I knew I wanted to write books when he was first born, but I didn't know what I wanted to write about. And when he was about 2.5, he was in the back of the car and he said, "Mom, does God open the flowers?" And I just thought, wow, that's such a great question. And I just felt like that's the idea. That's the thesis statement really for my first book. And really throughout all the various stages of his life, he has unknowingly inspired all the books. Even, in this scenario here, where it was like his thoughts about girls, really it has been, his thoughts about race or his thoughts about God or his thoughts about death or his thoughts about, in this case, gender that have kind of given me the ideas for what to write about next.
Wow. That said, do you have any ideas for your next book? I know you're on your sixth. Is there a seventh in the works?
It's interesting because the books that I do now are geared for 4 to 8 years old, and now that my son is 9, almost 10, I've thought about maybe, and people ask me all the time about getting into YA because that's where he actually has asked me multiple times, like, "Oh, you should write a graphic novel," because that's what he's really into. So I don't know, but as because all of my books have kind of grown up with him, I feel like he's kind of out of that sweet spot of the 4 to 8 year old. So I don't know. I'm stuck right now. I have to see. I have a little writer's block.
Well, we'll definitely be looking forward to whatever it is that you write or publish next. And before we let you go, Lindsay, when we talk about women and just young girls being inspired by women like yourself, what advice would you share with young journalists who admire you but may be fearful or skeptical about getting into the media industry just because of all of the shifts and turns and changes? It's almost ever shrinking and ever changing. And, the future of media and journalism is constantly called into question. So, what are your thoughts?
I don't think that it is shrinking. I think it's really expanding just because you have these new um, opportunities really with the advent of streaming news, for example. And where before with linear, when we were just talking about TV or just having news networks, television networks, there was always a very limited amount of real estate and then plus the commercials. So, if you look at World News Tonight, which I anchor on Sundays, we only do 22 minutes worth of news in that 30-minute block because of commercials. So 22 minutes to tell like all the news of the world globally is really a very finite amount of time. But when you put that into streaming, the show that I do every night, ABC News Live Prime, is an hour and a half. And we have a little more control with the commercial breaks there, and we can really tell long form stories. And so I look at it in a way of it's a whole new realm that we're entering into, and there are more opportunities now. So you see all of these new streaming platforms like with Kiki Palmer and Issa Rae, and it really, to me, it's like it's this whole new world. And so just like a friend of mine, when I was thinking about writing a children's book, I had been pondering it for a few years. And I said, I'm really thinking about doing it. And he said, then write the book. And the next day I started writing. Somehow it like empowered me just by hearing him say that. And I would say for any young woman who wants to do it, I would say just do it. And now we carry around our phones with the video cameras in them, and you can easily upload onto YouTube. So things that I used to have to do that would take a whole crew with an audio sound tech or a videographer, I can now do on my own. We can all do on our own, just with our phones and upload it, and we have our own little networks. And so I think that the world is your oyster, and I wouldn't let yeah, there like papers maybe diminishing. There are things that are getting smaller, but as those go away, new things are coming.
Absolutely. Lindsay Davis, let our viewers know how they can purchase your book.
Sure, it's available wherever you buy your books on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I hope that you will find this valuable for the young people and maybe the older people in your lives. I hope that it will be an inspiration.
Again, it is Girls of the World. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for your time today, as well as the impact you're making not only in the lives of young girls, but in our world. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Selena.